Rajiv Patel never imagined that a flickering chandelier in Dubai would spark an affair with his billionaire boss's wife, Aisha Al-Mansoor, a secret so dangerous it would destroy lives, expose lies, and unravel into an HIV scandal that shook the entire city. Rajiv Patel was 28 when he first stepped off the plane in Dubai, clutching a worn leather wallet and a head full of dreams. He had left behind a dusty village in Gujarat where his mother still cooked on a clay stove and prayed for his safety every night. Dubai was everything he imagined: towering skyscrapers, golden sunsets, and the smell of money floating through the air. He landed a job as an electrician at Al Noor Properties, a massive real estate company owned by the powerful and untouchable Khalid Al-Mansoor. For Rajiv, it was a new chapter, a chance to climb out of poverty and maybe one day send his family back home something more than just hope. He shared a cramped apartment with 6 other Indian workers, surviving on instant noodles and the occasional shawarma. But he didn't complain. Hard work didn't scare him. Getting noticed did. That changed the day he entered Khalid's mansion to fix a flickering chandelier. The house looked like a museum. Marble floors, glass walls, and silence so thick it made him nervous. That's when he saw her, Aisha Al-Mansoor, graceful, flawless, and hauntingly beautiful. She wasn't like the women he'd known back home. Her presence demanded attention, but her eyes told a different story, one of loneliness and boredom wrapped in luxury. She watched him work quietly, her perfume hanging in the air long after she left the room. That brief encounter marked the beginning of something dangerous. Rajiv couldn't stop thinking about her, the way she looked at him, as if she saw through the uniform and sweat. Days turned into restless nights, and every time he passed the mansion gates for maintenance, his heart pounded faster. He didn't know it yet, but that single meeting had set off a chain of events that would destroy everything he ever dreamed of building. Aisha Al-Mansoor lived in a mansion built like a palace, but inside it felt like a glass cage. Her husband, Khalid, was always away. Board meetings in London, construction projects in Qatar, luxury events she wasn't invited to. Her days were quiet, filled with designer clothes, expensive loneliness, and silence that echoed louder than any argument. When Rajiv came by to fix the lights that evening, it was supposed to be just another repair job, but something about the young worker caught her off guard. He wasn't like the polished men she usually met. There was a rawness in his confidence, a spark she hadn't felt in years. What started as polite conversation soon turned into long stares and unspoken tension that neither of them dared to acknowledge. The next week, she called the company again, pretending there were issues with the wiring. When Rajiv showed up, she made sure the house was empty. One coffee turned into hours of stolen moments, and those moments turned into something physical, reckless, and impossible to hide. They began meeting in secret, far from the mansion's cameras, rented hotel rooms, hidden parking lots, and quiet corners of the city where no one would recognize her. Aisha told herself it was harmless, just a distraction, but with every meeting the risk grew heavier. Rajiv, caught between desire and fear, couldn't resist her. The rush was addictive, sneaking around in the shadows of Dubai's glittering skyline, pretending they weren't playing with fire. But every secret leaves a trace, and theirs was no different. Someone had started noticing the strange timing of Rajiv's visits. The mansion's driver, Imran, had sharp eyes and an even sharper memory. He watched, waited, and collected the puzzle pieces they were too blinded by passion to hide. What felt like love to them was quickly becoming a ticking time bomb. Imran had been with the Al-Mansoor family for nearly a decade, a man who knew when to talk and when to stay invisible. To most people, he was just the driver, but to Khalid, he was more like a silent investigator, a man trusted to notice what others missed. When Aisha's routine started to shift, Imran noticed immediately. She began dressing differently for no reason, leaving the house at odd hours, and smiling at her phone in ways she hadn't in years. The final spark came when he saw Rajiv's name repeatedly on the visitor log for maintenance calls. It didn't take long for suspicion to turn into certainty. He installed a hidden dash cam in the car Rajiv often used to drive equipment around the property. Within days, the footage told a story too explicit to misunderstand. Aisha and Rajiv in intimate moments, laughing, touching, completely unaware they were being recorded. Imran didn't say a word. He copied the footage onto a USB drive and tucked it away in a small metal box under his bed. He knew that kind of evidence could buy loyalty or survival, depending on who paid for it. Aisha, meanwhile, grew restless and paranoid, as if she could sense the walls closing in. She stopped answering Rajiv's calls as often, started pulling away, and her once confident demeanor crumbled into quiet panic. Rajiv noticed the change but couldn't figure out why. Then one night, his phone buzzed with a short, cryptic message from her. "We need to stop. Something's wrong with me." The text hit him like a cold slap and his mind went wild with possibilities. He tried to call her back, but the number went dead. What neither of them knew was that Imran had already passed word to Khalid that something was very wrong at home, and soon everything would blow up in their faces. Rajiv's body started giving up before his mind did. At first it was just fatigue, long hours under the Dubai sun, endless wiring jobs, skipped meals. But then came the fevers, night sweats and strange rashes spreading across his arms. He blamed the heat, maybe food poisoning, but deep down something felt wrong. When the symptoms got worse, he dragged himself to a small clinic in Dera, a place where migrant workers went for cheap treatment. The doctor ordered blood tests, and when the results came back, the world stopped spinning, HIV positive. The words echoed in his head like gunfire. He sat there frozen, sweat pooling on his forehead, unable to speak. There was only one person he had been with, Aisha. The realization hit harder than the diagnosis itself. He stumbled out of the clinic, his vision blurring, heart pounding with anger and disbelief. He tried calling her again and again, but her phone stayed off. By the next day, when he went back to the mansion, the guards told him Madame Aisha had flown to London for treatment. The staff whispered behind closed doors that she was sick, some mysterious illness the family didn't talk about. But Rajiv knew better. He knew what she had given him and what she had been hiding all along. Word reached him through another worker that Khalid had found out something and had sent her away quietly to avoid gossip. Rajiv's chest filled with rage. He wanted to confront Khalid, to scream, to tell the world what that family had done to him. But he was a poor worker in a foreign country, and one wrong move could get him deported, or worse. That night, he sat alone on his bunk, staring at the city lights, realizing his dream life had turned into a slow, living nightmare. Khalid Al-Mansoor was not a man who reacted with emotion. He calculated. When he discovered his wife's affair and her illness, rage didn't show on his face. It hid behind calm eyes and quiet plans. He couldn't allow the world to know that an Indian laborer had touched his wife, let alone that she had infected him with a disease that could destroy his family's reputation. Using Imran's footage and a few phone calls, Khalid built a trap sharp enough to cut Rajiv's life to pieces. He ordered one of his managers to plant expensive jewelry, cash, and a gold watch in Rajiv's locker at the labor camp. A few days later, the Dubai police raided the quarters in the middle of the night. They tore through his belongings and found exactly what they were told to find. Rajiv was stunned, speechless, his body shaking as they handcuffed him. He shouted that it was a setup, that he hadn't stolen anything, but nobody cared. In the eyes of the system, a rich man's word always outweighed a poor man's truth. The next morning, his picture was on the company's internal bulletin labeled "Employee Theft, Case Under Investigation." His co-workers avoided him like a curse. Sitting in a cold holding cell, Rajiv's mind ran wild. It all made sense now. Aisha's disappearance, Khalid's silence, and Imran's watchful eyes. This wasn't just revenge. It was erasure. Khalid wanted to wipe him from existence, to bury the scandal under layers of lies and legal paperwork. Rajiv's name was dragged through the mud, while Aisha's was protected behind her husband's wealth. Days turned into weeks as Rajiv waited for a hearing that never came. In that dark, stinking cell, surrounded by concrete and hopelessness, he realized he wasn't just being punished. He was being buried alive. Months passed before Aisha returned to Dubai, but she wasn't the same woman who had left. The once glamorous, confident wife now moved like a shadow, thin and pale, her beauty fading under the weight of sickness and guilt. She checked herself into a private medical facility under a false name, desperate to keep her secret hidden. But secrets have a way of leaking, especially when money and scandal mix. A young nurse who handled her chart realized who she was, the wife of billionaire Khalid Al-Mansoor, and quietly snapped photos of her medical records. Within days, those images were circulating online. The world soon learned that the wife of one of Dubai's richest men was HIV positive. News channels exploded with speculation. Social media was flooded with theories. Some blamed her husband. Others whispered about a mystery lover. Khalid's pristine reputation began to crack. He tried to silence the story through lawyers and hush money, but it was too late. The scandal had teeth. Reporters surrounded the mansion gates, and headlines screamed, "Al-Mansoor family hit by HIV scandal." To make things worse, Imran, the driver who had been sitting quietly on his secret, decided it was his moment to cash in. He sold the footage of Aisha and Rajiv's affair to a foreign tabloid for a massive payday. The video spread across the internet like wildfire. Khalid's empire began to crumble overnight. Investors pulled out, business partners vanished, and whispers of corruption surfaced. Aisha's health deteriorated fast, and she couldn't handle the public humiliation. She stopped eating, refused treatment, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling for hours. For her, the pain wasn't just physical. It was the realization that her secret love had destroyed every life it touched, and there was no coming back from the storm she had unleashed. Rajiv sat in his cell, unaware that the outside world had erupted into chaos. He didn't know that his name was now plastered across news outlets, or that the scandal had shaken Dubai's elite circles. Weeks later, a guard whispered the news through the bars. Aisha Al-Mansoor was dead. The report said organ failure, but the whispers told a darker story. Some claimed she overdosed on her own medication. Others said Khalid had her quietly poisoned to end the embarrassment. Rajiv's hands trembled as the reality sank in. The woman who had turned his life upside down was gone, and her death sealed every unanswered question. A few days later, investigators reopened the case after discovering inconsistencies in her medical records. Someone had tampered with documents to alter the dates of her illness, making it look like she contracted HIV long before the affair began. The trail led back to Khalid himself. The authorities raided his company offices, uncovering forged papers and offshore accounts tied to massive financial fraud. Within weeks, the once untouchable businessman was arrested for obstruction of justice and embezzlement. His fall was swift and brutal. Shareholders abandoned him, and his empire dissolved overnight. Imran, the driver who had set everything in motion, disappeared with the tabloid money, leaving no trace behind. Rajiv, meanwhile, was quietly released from jail and deported back to India. There was no apology, no justice, just a stamped passport and a broken man stepping off a flight into a life he no longer recognized. He returned to his village, gaunt and hollow, carrying the virus, the shame, and the ghost of the woman who had ruined him. The story faded from headlines, but in the shadows of Dubai's glittering skyline, the truth remained. A forbidden love, a deadly secret, and a reminder that even paradise hides its darkest sins.